I have compiled what I believe to be the best partner Pokemon for every restricted in Regulation G. Today we will be going over these cores and why I think they work so well together. Of course, let me know your thoughts down below if I did happen to miss any potential partners or you think I overlooked something. I'm more than happy to hear your thoughts. But with that, guys, I also plan on making guides on how to use every restricted Pokemon. Those will start later on in the week, so keep an eye out for that. But with that, I say we jump into things here, and we're going to start off with Groudon. Now, Groudon has a lot of really strong partners. You know, you've got the likes of Ogerpon Fire, really taking advantage of the sun, right? If you wanted to commit full onto the sun, then you also get the photosynthesis users like Raging Bolt, right? But in my opinion, I think Fluttermane is by far the best abuser of Groudon's power that we have in the format right now. Now, this is very much so a little bit biased. I have been playing this game for a long time, and I have seen Groudon and Xerneas do incredible things over the course of my time playing this game. And Fluttermane is basically a Xerneas at home. Obviously, you're not here to set up and then do big damage, but more often than not, you're going to pair this with a choice specs, and now you're going to be able to abuse the sun to give you either a speed boost or a special attack boost to do even more damage. And you're just going to pair this thing with just massive damage output. Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, Shadow Ball, right? And maybe the odd Icy Wind for some speed control, right? Maybe even a Perish if that's something you're looking into. But long story short, the coverage here is incredible. This is why I think Fluttermane is the best abuser of Groudon's Sun. First of all, you get these big physical attackers, so if they're going to try to wall Groudon, they're probably a little weaker on the special side. Fluttermane is going to be able to capitalize on that, and vice versa. Now, you also have the fact of just ground coverage and ground plus fairy coverage is perfect offensive synergy. You guys have heard me say this on the channel before, and I'm sure you will hear me say it on the channel again. But if you want to resist a Moonblast from a Fluttermane, you cannot resist the ground move followed suit from the Groudon, and vice versa. If you want to resist the Groudon, you cannot resist the Fluttermane. Best case scenario, you get neutral to both, right? And it's just incredible offensive output. Right, now Fluttermane also takes advantage of that sun as well, and it just feels really strong. Like I said, though, you do have other areas where you get other Pokemon that are capable here. You get Raging Bolt, which really helps against the likes of something like a Kyogre or any other water types that would generally try to deal with the Groudon. Maybe a flying type that's trying to be immune to Groudon, right? So Raging Bolt is another really strong option here. But I think the overall consistently, the one I'm very happy to say is the key is this Fluttermane. I think Fluttermane plus Groudon, if you are not running both of these on your Groudon team, I don't want to say you're doing something wrong, but I think you're missing out. I think Fluttermane beside Groudon is incredibly strong. And I mean, I could keep going, I could keep rambling, but we're just going to jump on over to the next one. And that next one is going to be Kyogre. And for Kyogre, it's a little weird because there's a lot of things historically that have been very strong beside Kyogre, which once again, it's going to shine. It's still going to be Tornadus here. Don't get me wrong, Tornadus is still by far going to be Kyogre's best partner. You get 100% accurate Bleak Wind Storms thanks to the Rain being active, not by yourself anymore, right? Before it was you'd set Rain and then you'd Bleak Wind, but now you have Kyogre, which is a very strong Drizzle setter, very strong Rain setter, Drizzle user, I should say, right? And you just get the Rain immediately. You no longer have to take that turn to set the Rain Dance for these Bleak Winds. You get absolute speed control here, which Kyogre absolutely loves. You get the ability to reset Rain if they try to switch in a Groudon or another weather setter, in this case like a Koraidon as well. It just feels, these two are a match made in heaven. Right, you do not separate these two. These two have always been really strong together, and they probably always will be really strong together as long as they're in formats together. Now, other modes that I like here, I mean, I like Amoonguss. We talk a lot about Amoonguss later on, so I'm not going to bring it up here. I think Torn is by far the best partner. Rillaboom to help deal with the Kyogre Mirror if that becomes a problem. Right, I mean, obviously you have the likes of Swift Swimmers as well. I'm a huge fan of not really having a Swift Swimmer. I mean, Basculegion could be cool, but my problem with the Swift Swimmers in this format, I mean, like you're doubling up on the water types. You're not really gaining all that much that Kyogre doesn't already do. Big time Water Spout is already doing like 80% to any neutral hit pretty much, right? So you don't necessarily need to abuse it with more water usage, right, where you can just open things up, right? Torn hits the grass types as well. This is just perfect, right? There's really not a lot else to say. I think Urshifu Water is probably, if you're going to try and abuse the rain, Urshifu Rapid Strike, just being able to click Surging Strikes. We've seen it in Regulation E and G and NF, right? Yeah, I think with like Pelipper Surging Strikes. Yeah, I think Pelipper plus Urshifu, like we've seen that core be good, but now you just add a Kyogre, right? And like you're just gonna be hitting Surging Strikes for crazy amounts of damage. It's disgusting. But more importantly, Torn is the best restricted I could come up with for this one. The next restricted is going to be a little controversial because I am not a big believer here, right? And Rayquaza is good, right? And this is probably one of the few restricteds I'm going to talk about how to actually operate the restricted, right? You can go Clear Amulet, you can go Choice Band, and this is basically going to become your Dragonite. It's going to be a restricted Dragonite. So your best partner here, in my opinion, is actually going to be Shenpao. Now, it's basically a restricted Dragonite. I am not a believer in Rayquaza in this format because what you're going to be doing is you are going to end up just having a restricted slot that could have just been a Dragonite, right? If you're going to go with this Clear Amulet or the Choice Band variant, right, coming off of a 150 attack set, yes, you get maybe a little bit more damage, but you don't get access to the inner focus. Yes, you get to shut off weather, which is pretty good, but it just doesn't feel right to me. But if you are going to go for it, you do have the likes of Rayquaza. It is really, really strong. I would think physical is still probably in your best interest if you want to go with a Clear Amulet. If you want another item, maybe you could look into special. But more importantly, I think more often than not, you're going to want to drop big physical hits with Rayquaza. You also still get Dragon Ascent. That's probably one of your best options and one of your main reasons why you would ever run Rayquaza over Dragonite in the first place and why I think you ever want it, right? Like, yes, it's basically flying type close combat, but in a format where flying type coverage is incredible, Dragon Ascent is going to be really strong, and you want to pair that with Shenpao. Like, there's nothing that's switching in to a Dragon Ascent from a Shenpao. Like, there's going to be switch-ins, but they're taking big-time damage. So, that would be my one niche where you're going to see Rayquaza. But I do think Shenpao is its best partner if you are going for that physical build, which I think is going to be the most common if you are running Rayquaza in the first place. Now, granted, there could be a world where you go special because you do still have 150 special attack as well. So, you could try to abuse that, but for right now, I'm sticking on what I believe is going to be the best build, which is going to be physical, which in my opinion needs to be paired besides Shenpao. And there's really not much else to say other than that. Calyrex. Okay, we're going to start with Calyrex Ice. I think Calyrex Ice is one of the strongest Pokemon in the format, and I think there's ways to make it run. You do not necessarily need redirection for Calyrex, right? But I do still think one of its best partners is Amoonguss. And I do have two options for this one, and it's going to be Amoonguss, and it's going to be Farigiraf. I think these two Pokemon alone are tying as the best partner for this Calyrex right now. Amoonguss is a little weird because you do double up on that fire weakness. Of course, with Terrestrialization, you can maneuver your way out of that weakness on both of these Pokemon when you so need to, right? So I don't think it's too big of a deal, and we've seen it work in previous formats, right? Big one that I look at here is the Palkia Calyrex stuff from like Ice Palk, right? Those cores from back in the day where it was Calyrex, Amoonguss, Palkia, right? And that was the core, you know? And it was, you get the Amoonguss, you get to redirect, you get the Pollen Puff yourself, right? Because Calyrex doesn't go down easily, right? This Pokemon is the definition of bulk, right? 100, 150, 130. This Pokemon does not die in one hit. It is very tough to take this Pokemon down in one hit. So if they're going to start chipping you down, Amoonguss can not only redirect those chip shots away, they can also just heal you back up if it chooses. Instead of redirecting, it can just heal up my own Calyrex and just get big damage that way. It's also nice to have access to like Rage Powder, Trick Room. Feels really, really good. Now I think Farigiraf is also nice. It's just a really strong option to pair with a Trick Room team, right? It's very, very strong way to get Trick Room up versus Calyrex Shadow, which would normally do a lot to Calyrex Amoonguss lead. So I think having a Farigiraf is really, really strong here, right? And I really wanted to focus on the best partner for Calyrex being something that was going to support it really well. Of course, there are options for Calyrex where you can just jump and do massive damage with a partner Pokemon. I think there are cool options there, but I really wanted to focus in this video on the options that are going to allow Calyrex to go, and this Amoonguss and this Farigiraf, in my opinion, are what are allowing Calyrex to go in this format. Like I said before, you have the redirection, you get Trick Room while Calyrex attacks, you get Trick Room in the face of things that Calyrex may not like. It just feels like a really, really strong two really strong options here. If they do decide to lead Urshifu, that gets a little weird, but you have 3 other slots for that, right? I think these are the best partners for Calyrex because getting into Trick Room, Glacial Lance, stopping priority while you're in Trick Room, and just being able to heal yourself these two are tied for the best partners for Calyrex Ice, in my opinion. Calyrex Shadow. Now, Calyrex Shadow is one of those ones that is definitely the talk of the town right now. This is by far the most watched restricted from every trainer that I've ever talked to in Regulation G so far. It is going to be incredible. Now, we've seen a lot of Mienshao. This a little old trick coming around. You don't see Mienshao too often in formats anymore, right? But with Mienshao getting access to stuff like Wide Guard to help the mirror match versus other Calyrex, you get to go Feint, which helps the Wide Guards. You can break Wide Guard with Feint. You can break Protect with Feint. Don't let them stall anything out as you're spamming your Astral Barrages, as you're spamming those expanding forces if you do end up with that option, right? And then you also just get Close Combat, which just hits the Dark types, right? They want to bring a Dark type to Calyrex. I would want to bring my Dark type versus a Calyrex, and then you get Close Combat. You also get access to Fake Out as well, just hindering them off. This is probably the moveset you're running on Mienshao as well. Maybe a Sash here if you don't have it on Cali. If you have the Sash on Cali, I don't even know what you'd put here. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. I do not know what you would put on this Pokemon if you have the Sash on Calyrex. There's probably a lot of options that I'm not going to talk about. But most importantly, just having the ability to have fighting type coverage in general feels really, really strong. Mienshao feels like its best partner. Wide Guard feels incredible. Feint so they can't protect out of things. Fake out protection as well feels incredible. Other fighting type that I do want to talk about is actually Palmot. And Palmot, I think, is one of those Pokemon that just goes a little bit under the radar because its move, Revival Blessing, is absolutely disgusting. Once again, we're talking about a Pokemon that has Close Combat, which feels really, really strong. Like I said before, you get that fighting coverage into those Dark types that they want to be bringing versus Calyrex. You get the added benefit of just kind of doing well versus Miraidon with the Volt Absorb, right? And yes, you lose the Feint, you lose the Wide Guard, right? But what you don't lose, or what you gain with Revival Blessing of, let's just say they have to kill Calyrex, right? So if they kill Calyrex, Palmot comes in, and now you have another Calyrex in the back after a Revival Blessing. This one gets a little bit susceptible to like a well-positioned team from the other end, right? Like a strong player will realize that they have to be scared of Revival Blessing and will play around that properly. But sometimes there's just nothing you can do. I think Revival Blessing is a really, really cool tech to talk about here as well. I just wanted to shout out Palmot because I don't think this Pokemon gets enough love. One other Pokemon I do want to talk about really, really quickly is Indeedee, and I do not want to talk about Indeedee. I do not want to encourage clicking Expanding Force and setting up Psychic Terrain, but I have to acknowledge the fact that it is a very strong opportunity. Getting Psychic Terrain on board so your Calyrex can hit Expanding Force just as hard as anything else in the format pretty much is really, really strong. You're a very fast Pokemon. Stopping priority into you is very, very strong as well. I have to mention Indeedee here. It is going to be a good core, right? Even the three of these alone are probably just straight up a core as well, right? It feels really, really strong. Just having the Expanding Force, having the Astral Barrage, potential helping hand as well. Having Indeedee beside Calyrex feels incredible. I think that it's probably tied between Mienshao and Indeedee on this Pokemon. I think it's really, really strong. Calyrex base form. I said I was doing every restricted, guys. I'm going to do every restricted. But Calyrex base form's best partner is box 32. It's just going to go box 32, guys. Let's move on. Okay, Dialga and Dialga Origin, I am going to group together. I wasn't going to group them together, but I figured if I didn't group them together, it would just get a little bit repetitive. So I think what these Pokemon both really appreciate is having a way to gain a little bit of health back and really, really strong support. And I think I like that strong support from a grass type. I think Amoonguss and or Rillaboom are both very strong options for Dialga, right? I think you pick either Amoonguss or Rillaboom to help you get your Trick Room up, whether you want to go with the Fake Out route or you want to go with a redirection and a self-healing. I think Amoonguss is very, very nice for that because Dialga is tanky, right? Both variants are pretty tanky. They've got a lot of bulk into them, right? And having the ability to just gain that health back after they slowly chip you down, because you do not have a lot of weaknesses here. Ground is one of your few weaknesses, and having a grass type feels incredibly strong, which is one of the main reasons I like Rillaboom as well, because you actually pressure those ground types back, whereas Amoonguss is just kind of here to support Dialga, right? I think both of these are really, really strong. Beside the Dialgas, I think both are really, really good as well. Something else that you probably want to talk about is probably something like a Trick Room Sweeper, probably something along the lines of a Ursaluna. I really do like Ursaluna on a core like this, probably the Blood Moon variant. And what you are going to try and do on a core like this is to mainly use Amoonguss and Rillaboom to leverage your Dialga. Utilize that, get Trick Room up, and try to find a way where you get Dialga and Ursaluna on the field at the same time. Now, my first instinct is you lead Rillaboom Dialga, you click Trick Room and you U-turn, and then you get Dialga and Ursaluna on the field pretty easily. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but that would be one of the game plans or one of the approaches I would take to trying to get that onto the field, right? I think Ursaluna and Dialga go well together. Just a big Trick Room sweeper. It doesn't need to necessarily be Ursaluna Blood Moon. Could be physical Ursaluna as well, which actually I do want to talk about really, really quickly, because you get Earthquake. And just like how Cresselia would be around, right? You now get Telepathy, and Telepathy prevents you from being hit by your partner's attacks. Now, if you're going to go with the Telepathy mode, do not run Amoonguss because you cannot Pollen Puff yourself. I'm going to put that out into the world right now. If you are going with the Telepathy mode, you can run Amoonguss. Just be aware that you cannot Pollen Puff yourself because of Telepathy. However, beside Ursaluna, and you can start spamming Earthquakes plus Dialga, that feels really, really good to me. So I think some combination of Amoonguss, Rillaboom, and then a big-time Trick Room sweeper goes really, really well here. These are the ones I would... Ursaluna are the ones I would recommend on here. I think they're both really, really good Pokemon. Gives you that switch into the electric moves from the Miraidon as well. And it just feels really, really strong overall. Next on the list, we're going to go Palkia. And Palkia is one of those Pokemon, guys, that in my opinion, in single restricted, feels a little suboptimal. None of its moves are really 100% accurate, unless they'd actually decided to give it Scald, which they still have not decided to give it Scald. So, right, you're stuck with, like, the Spatial Rens, which is a 95. You're stuck with the Hydro Pumps, which is, I think, an 80. Not that it really matters, but it is an 80, right? So, what I'm concerned with Palkia is those ability for my big restricted Pokemon where all of its moves are just going to potentially miss, and that does not feel fun. So I have two options for this one. Once again, you guys are going to hate me for this one because it's going to sound a little repetitive, and once again, it is going to be that Rillaboom, it is going to be that Amoonguss. All right, I'm going to talk about less about it this time because I did just kind of talk about similar concepts to that Dialga. Palkia can get the Trick Room up, really appreciates getting healed up from Amoonguss. Once again, we saw that Calyrex Ice, Palkia, Amoonguss core back in Sword and Shield, and I'm sure once we get double restricted, we will see it here again, right? So I think just the ability to heal up, the ability to support Palkia is really, really strong, but something I haven't talked about yet, and something I am going to talk about to mix up the video, and I think that's going to be a Gravity user. Now, there's a few options here, and I'm going to shout out Sableye. I don't love Sableye in this format, but it does get access to Prankster Gravity. You do get access to Quash as well, which basically now you're going to say, I'm going to get Gravity up. Now once Gravity is up, I'm going to make sure my Pokemon are moving first. And that feels incredibly strong to me, right? You now cannot miss your moves with Palkia. You get to do big damage. You could set Rain Dance if you really wanted to boost it Hydro Pumps as well. You could also set Sunny Day if you wanted to do something like that, but I think Sunny Day is a little more whack. I think you'd rather go Rain Dance here. But my main issue with Palkia is if I'm going to run Palkia, why am I not running Walking Wake, right? In a single restricted format where I can just open up my restricted slot by running a Walking Wake and a different restricted as opposed to Palkia, that feels a little better to me. That's where I would approach this matchup, or that's how I would approach building Palkia. Now, I could be wrong. I mean, hey, Palkia is a good Pokemon, right? Like, it has the stats to back up a good Pokemon. It has access to Trick Room. You can maybe pair it with a Tailwind Setter, right? So I think something along the lines of Gravity is very, very strong to pair with Palkia. Something else you could do, once again, is Farigiraf. If you are worried about Grassy Glides and the like from Rillaboom, you can go ahead, pair it with a Farigiraf so you get the Armor Tail. Farigiraf also gets Gravity. It's not as immediate as the Sableye or a Prankster Gravity, but I think just in general, having something along the lines of Gravity beside Palkia really makes Palkia go, because I do not want to miss moves with my only restricted that I have on the field. Hey, if I have two restricteds, I can afford one of my restricteds to be a little bit more shaky on actually connecting its moves. Whereas if I only have one restricted, I am really, really sold on needing to make sure a majority of its moves are hitting, right? Like back when I ran Groudon in that tournament last week, it was Precipice Blades, but my other two moves were Tantrum and Heat Crash, because if I needed to hit a move, I was clicking one of the 2 moves that I needed to click to hit my move. Palkia doesn't have that, where I think gravity really, really benefits it there. That's the main reason I'm suggesting this. Although, once again, tons of shoutouts to Amoonguss, shoutouts to Rillaboom. Both of them are really, really strong beside these pieces. Giratina and Giratina Origin. Now, these Pokemon historically have been bad. And, I mean, they are probably still going to be bad. Okay? They just don't have enough of a punch. Right? Like, its big stat is HP, which just is kind of like a big feels bad, man. But, like, it's not that bad when you really think about it. With the ability to Terra, it could be very interesting as well. I haven't looked into them too much, but I think my main partner that I'm looking at here is going to be one of the most boring Pokemon you guys will ever see, and that's going to be Incineroar. People are going to hate me here. I also like the likes of Grimmsnarl. I think both of these dark types pair really, really well with both forms. I think Incineroar is really, really, especially if you run the Levitate variant. Like, if you go Origin form and you get Levitate, I think it's really, really strong switching for the Precipice Blades with the Incineroar. I think the combination here is really, really cool. But more importantly, it just slows the game down, and that's what Giratina is trying to do. Right? Giratina is not going to be one of those restricteds that is going to just absolutely try to blow you up. Right? Now, granted, I do believe you get access to the likes of setup like Calm Mind if you chose to do that behind screens. I think it's an option, but it's not one of those Pokemon that is going to be like that Calyrex Ghost that's just going to immediately throw damage out. It's not going to be the Calyrex Ice that's going to start steamrolling. It's not going to be the Kyogre that's clicking Terra Water Spout, you know? It's going to be one of those passive Pokemon, and I think having Intimidate, having Parting Shot, having Fake Out, having Screens, just in tag team with the ability to set up Giratina and its bulkiness really, really takes Giratina to the next level. Now, I'm not saying run Giratina. I don't think it's an amazing restricted in this format, but if you're going to, this is where I would start. Something along the lines of Giratina, Incin, maybe a Grimmsnarl, maybe both. This is where I would start. I think they go really, really strong together. Something else I do want to mention really, really quickly is Ogerpon Water. And I'm going to talk about Ogerpon Water again later on as well, but I think it's a very interesting option where it can be a bulky follow me user, but it can also go on the offensive. And I think Giratina really appreciates that on this team or on teams with Giratina, because you get the ability to say, okay, well, all of a sudden I'm going to support Giratina. I have the option to set my Giratina up now, but you also have the option to just go offensive when you need to. Oh, they're going to be scared of Giratina. They're going to expect to follow me. Nope, joke's on you. I'm going to click Ivy Cudgel. I'm just going to remove Instant from the field, right? It gives you that option. Having the offensive pressure from what would normally be a follow me slot is really, really strong beside Giratina. It might just be what it needs to make it go. Now, granted, once again, I still don't think it's a strong core, but let's move on. All right, guys. Everybody's favorite designed Pokemon. Why is it not a water type? I don't know. But anyways, Lugia is here. There's a lot to be said about Lugia. You get an incredible ability in multi-scale. It's really, really strong. You get the ability to Terra, this wall of a Pokemon now, at 106, 130, 154, right? You actually get an interesting stat where you're going to actually outpace Urshifu's as well, but we'll talk about that when we actually get into the guides later on. But there's a few options here, right? I could be boring. Right, I could be boring, and I could say, you pair this thing with like an Amoonguss, you pair this thing with an Incineroar, which sometimes boring is good. And boring is good because it works, right? Boring is boring because it works. If it didn't work, it wouldn't be boring. It would be cool, right? But this is just consistency, right? I could sit here and talk about how Amoonguss and Incineroar are incredible pieces for Lugia, but we know how they are. You get the Intimidate support, you get Parting Shot support, you get the ability to redirect, you get the ability to Pollen Puff yourself, right? But I'm not going to sit here and do that. I'm going to talk about Lightning Rod. And I think Lightning Rod, once again, probably not the most consistent option. But in terms of not being boring and just keeping things up to date, I think Raichu is a very cool option here. It tends to come around in restricted formats. It's very interesting because you can go Terra Fairy. And I did this back earlier on where I went Terra Fairy, Lightning Rod, Raichu, and it would stop Raging Bolt. But now you also get the likes of potentially just immediately stopping Miraidon. And I think that's what Lugia doesn't have going for it. So being able to stop Miraidon entirely and just allow Lugia to do Lugia things feels really, really good. I'm not going to recommend the whole Dynamax play where you would Volt Switch and proc policy on Lugia. Not going to recommend that. I don't think it's solid. I don't think it's all that great when you're just taking away your own multi-scale, right? But I think being able to protect the Lugia is really, really strong, and I'm going to talk about it, right? Once again, I could have been boring. I could have sat here and discussed how healing up with Amoonguss was great, and I do think it is great, don't get me wrong. But I want to talk about other Pokemon that are potentially cool. I also, once again, I'm going to say Palmot, right? Like, there's going to be turns where they say, oh, I'm going to trade my Urshifu here. They're going to let me take Lunala. They're going to let me take the Lugia. I'm going to take the Lugia down. And Lugia is going to be gone. I don't mind losing my Urshifu because that's all I needed it for. Palmot comes in later on. Palmot heals up your Lugia. Lugia gets to 50%. Now, normally getting a Pokemon back at 50% isn't great, but Lugia gets the likes of Recover, right? I wasn't going to talk about Palmot on this core. I just kind of thought about it now because I mentioned it does get that Volt Absorb ability, right? Which is cool. It is a nice switch. And not that there's that many electric types, but in restricted formats, you can have Pokemon that are there strictly for one restricted to beat one restricted. And that's why I wanted to talk about Raichu mainly. Because you have this Pokemon and all of a sudden, I have a Miraidon matchup. Right? We've seen numerous Pokemon that have not only meant Pokemon that I've mentioned on this list already, but Pokemon that have seen past success in formats, in restricted formats that normally you wouldn't see. Raichu is a world champion behind Kyogre, beside Kyogre, right? Because it does that. Gastrodon has won numerous championships, not because I think Gastrodon is a good Pokemon, but Gastrodon's ability allows it to take away top threats in a format. And when that top threat in a format your opponent has to commit a restricted slot to, you can pilot and say, you know what, this last piece should maybe be a Raichu. I think I wanted to talk about it, right? If I just shut down Miraidon, I mean, sign me up. Where do I sign, right? Like, shutting down a Pokemon that's probably going to be one of the best Pokemon in the format, I mean, sign me up. I'll take it. Now, I don't think Lugia is a very good Pokemon, guys. I'm going to be honest. But Raichu is probably a very cool partner for it. We're talking everybody's favorite Ho-Oh next, guys. Once again, there are a few options you have here. I'm going to not say Amoonguss. I think Amoonguss is very, very strong naturally. But once again, just they cover each other well. You get double regenerator ability to switch in and out. But I am going to, once again, I'm going to talk about Ogerpon Water. I think it's very, very strong with Ho-Oh. And I also want to talk about Tinglu. Because Tinglu is kind of the talk of the town. I think Tinglu is a Pokemon that I really want to get into, but we'll talk about Tinglu fully later on. But for right now, synergy between Ogerpon and Ho-Oh, they feel really, really good together. Like, if they're going to bring in, like, a rock type that wants to hit a Ho-Oh, or maybe even a ground type that has a rock type move, Ogerpon is covering you from that, right? You can make Ho-Oh live Rock Slides. I don't even know what would click Rock Slide in this format right now. Most of the Groudons are running Precipice Blade, Swords Dance, Heat Crash. So if they're not running a rock move, you don't even care about it, right? Ogerpon does very well into Groudon. You also take advantage of Groudon's Sun. This core of 3, this might just be a core of 3. It wasn't intended to be a core of 3. I just wanted to talk about Ogerpon Ho-Oh and Tinglu Ho-Oh. But looking at it on my board, even the color synergy looks nice. Don't ask about color synergy, guys. I'm crazy. But besides the point, Ogerpon really, really good. And once again, that ability to redirect and support the Ho-Oh, but also just go on the offense that the Ho-Oh teams would generally not have, right? Back in the day, if you were running Ho-Oh, it tended to be a slower option, right? It was a slower option. It was a matchup check. It was, do you have an answer to take care of Ho-Oh through its recovers, through its damage, right? But now you have that option, and I think that's something to be said about these slow teams, where you now have the ability to redirect, support your slow pieces, but then when you need it, to go on offense. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's very, very good, and I think it has to be talked about, so we're talking about it. Tinglu, once again, just really playing into Ho-Oh's special defense here, right? We see it at 154. Wo-Chen could be cool. I'm going to be honest. The problem with Wo-Chen, though, is I am a physical attacker, and then I'm hindering myself as well. Whereas Tinglu is basically saying, I have base 154 special defense. I'm just going to make it that much better by hindering the special attack of everybody else. Right, I'm going to be a wall. If you are running Calyrex, Calyrex Shadow, I should say, is not going to appreciate going up against Ho-Oh Tinglu. I can confirm that right now, right? You get an Assault Vest on this piece. You get the ability to recover over here. It feels really, really strong, right? And it just allows Ho-Oh to do Ho-Oh things. Once again, more playing into that slower concept of a team. I don't know if I necessarily love Ho-Oh as a whole in single restricted, but I think if you're going to do it, Tinglu is a very strong partner. And I think Ogerpon is really cool as well. Okay, we're going to talk about Koraidon now. And once again, Koraidon, in my opinion, I am sticking with my guns here. And I'm going to stick with what I said for Groudon. And that is going to be Fluttermane. Once again, guys, any photosynthesis user that's going to abuse Sun, something to abuse Sun is what you want beside this piece. Once again, Ogerpon Fire, really, really strong as well, but I am still sticking with Fluttermane as the partner here. Once again, you just get to do big damage. And when you can do big damage into Sun, you get a Pokemon like Fluttermane. It is really, really strong. Since I no longer have a restricted slot available to me for my potential fairy type or ways to deal with Calyrex, I can afford or have to run a Calyrex myself. I can run Fluttermane. It deals with Calyrexes really decently well, especially if they're not the Sash variant. It just forces a Terra out of them, and it just feels really, really strong, right? Once again, just abusing Sun. Tons of other options here as well, right? But I do think that Fluttermane just doesn't double up on typings like a Raging Bolt would. It gives you the most spread damage, and it's very similar to what I said with Groudon. Now, granted, you do not get access to the whole, like, I have Ground Fairy perfect offensive synergy coverage, but I do still think it's incredibly, incredibly strong, right? Something else that would be cool here would maybe be like a Steel type, but my problem with the Steel types is all of the good Steel types are restricted, right? Like, I mean, King Gambit could be cool here, but putting Sun up for King Gambit doesn't really get you anywhere, right? So I do still think Fluttermane is really, really strong. It is probably the best option for Koraidon to pair with, and it just feels really, really strong. I've tested it a bit myself. The core, these two feel really, really good. You pair this with the likes of Incin, and you close out your core properly. These two go crazy. They do really, really good together. Now, Miraidon, this is the talk of the town, right? It's a very strong option, right? You get the special attack boost when you're in electric terrain. You get Electro Drift, which is double damage into super effective hits. It just feels like a really, really strong piece. It is fast. It hits hard. It is a bulkier Fluttermane, just happens to be electric type, it's with a different typing, right? It is really, really strong, and in my opinion, it is Iron Bundle. I am very, very adamant on Iron Bundle being the Pokemon here. You hit the ground types that are trying to stop Miraidon from using its Electro Drift. You actually get to have an item on Iron Bundle now. I'll say Covert Cloak or Focus Sash, both of which are very, very strong. And you also get the likes of just actually still getting your speed boost because Quark Drive is activated now, right? You don't need to run the booster energy for bundle. You actually get that item. And having that item, whether it be Focus Sash, Covert Cloak, plus the speed boost, is incredible. These two go together so well. It's like it was like a match made in heaven, right? But that's exactly what you'd expect, right? You expect the future paradoxes to go well with Miraidon. And you can probably pick a few other paradoxes as well that would go well with Miraidon because that's how they were built, right? They were built to say, okay, the future legendary is going to do well with the future paradoxes, right? And the past paradox is going to, past legendary is going to do very well with the past paradoxes. It just makes sense, right? That's how they were built, right? But having the ability to just hit those ground types that would normally cause Miraidon problems is very, very good. Maybe they're trying even to grass types, like Rillaboom wants to switch in here, right? Rillaboom is actually pretty decent into this core, but if you get any chip damage on Rillaboom, maybe Iron Bundle can finish it off, right? Maybe you pair this with something that else can, like something else to redirect the Rillaboom, right? Maybe a Incineroar, maybe an Ogerpon Fire. I really do like Ogerpon Fire on this core. I think this is an incredibly strong core right here. You get Fire, Water, Grass immediately. You support Miraidon incredibly well. You have Follow Me. You resist the Fairy with Ogerpon as well. You hit Fluttermane's back hard with the Ogerpon. These three feel incredible. Iron Bundle is by far its best partner. This one probably going to follow suit onto that core. But Iron Bundle, by far, being able to have an item and still get your Quark Drive boost is disgusting. Really, really strong. We're going to go Terapagos. And Terapagos is one of those Pokemon that just really, really appreciates being healed. Now, Terapagos is a very different Pokemon from something that we've seen before. It is basically playing Protect the Queen, right? You are basically going to have one move, and that's going to be your Terra Star Storm plus a coverage move. We'll just say Earth Power for the sake of putting Earth Power there. And then you're going to set up Calm Minds, and you're going to abuse your non-Terra form with Terra Shell, and you're going to abuse once you're in Terra form, and you're going to abuse these stats. It's disgusting, okay? Right, it is crazy. You can remove weather and terrain from the field as you want the turn you Terra. It's really, really good. It plays with potential setup from your opponent, right? If they're trying to get weather onto the field to do damage to you, it takes away the grassy terrains if they're trying to take care of you like that. Takes away the electric terrain from Miraidon. Really, really good Pokemon. So what do I suggest to pair with this thing? And I'm going to lean fully into playing Protect the Queen. Not with Fluttermane. It's going to be with Comfey. And it's going to be with Comfey. It's going to be the likes of Rillaboom. It's going to be the likes of Grimmsnarl. But I do think Comfey is going to be the Pokemon that I'm going to talk about in this video. And Triage is a disgusting ability. It's +3 to any healing move, meaning you can heal yourself with Floral Healing and just get back to full health. And the big benefit, I think, not only outside of Floral Healing, I think is Priority Draining Kiss. Because right now, a lot of the ways people are dealing with Terapagos to actually hit Terapagos is to click Close Combat with an Urshifu. It is a very strong option. It does a lot of damage. But Comfey does a very good job versus the Urshifus, especially the dark ones, right? And you hit those dark Urshifus, you hit them really, really strong with Draining Kiss. You get to heal your own Terapagos. You potentially get to set Trick Room here. You can potentially set Tailwind here. You get whichever speed control you want. You get to have Encore if they're trying to protect. You can do so many things with Comfey that is exactly what Terapagos wants you to do. Beside it, that this core is a match made in heaven, right? You get Terapagos kind of set up. You get Comfey in late game. Just when they think they're about to kill Terapagos, Comfey comes in, heals up the Terapagos. Now, obviously, guys, it's not an exact science, right? And nothing is in this game because there's always going to be teams that are equipped to try and deal with the popular cores. But Terapagos, Comfey, match made in heaven. You are going to want to see these two. You're going to want to have an answer to these two on your teams, if not just using them if you're trying to use Terapagos. Really, really good core, and I'm curious to see how it evolves moving forward. Base Kyurem, chuck it in box 32. Let's move on. Kyurem Black is going to be an interesting one. I want, once again, similar. I'm going to talk about any of the Ogerpon forms. I think Ogerpon Fire is really, really good. I also think Ogerpon Rock is something that's a little bit kind of not talked about enough, so I'll talk about it here. But basically, any Ogerpon form or any form of offensive redirection, and I think Ogerpon is exactly that, right? You can go ahead and have the offense for big pressure with Kyurem and Ogerpon. You can have the pressure to follow me and maybe set up a Dragon Dance. You can have the option to say, oh, wow, now I'm scared of Kyurem because I got a Dragon Dance up, right? But now you just protect the Kyurem and go on the offense with your Ogerpon, right? I think you have that opportunity to have that offensive redirection, and I feel it works really, really, really well together, right? It just basically shuts down Rillaboom. Instant is a little bit annoying here, but potentially you go Clear Amulet here, maybe go Loaded Dice, right? Maybe if Instant is a problem, maybe that's what the Ogerpon is, Ogerpon Rock is for, right? Ivy Cudgel. Instant doesn't want to take that. Yeah, you're going to be -1, but Instant still doesn't want to take that, right? Basically, Kyurem Black, I don't think it's very, very strong, but if you are going to run it, offensive redirection, specifically, in my opinion, any of the Ogerpons feel really, really strong beside it. Maybe even Ogerpon Grass to hinder off Intimidate, and then you go Loaded Dice. That could work too. Kyurem White, guys, there's not much to say here. This is Blizzard Go Burr. You have base 170 special attack. Let's fix the defensive stat by getting Snow on the field. Let's throw in a Alolan Ninetales here, guys. There's not much to say. We've seen Articuno Ninetales do well. We've seen it win a special event before in this format, actually quite recently as well, right? So I'm just going to have a better Articuno. Like, I'm actually going to do ridiculous amounts of damage. Nothing is switching into this. Like, there's really virtually no switching. Like, yes, there's going to be things that can live it, but not a lot of things that can live it. You're going to get the defense boost on your Kyurem, which is already incredible. Ice type restricted, getting Hail or getting Snow on the board now feels really, really strong. You get Hail, you get a Snow boost. You get a lot of potential. You get big damage. You get 100% accurate Blizzards. Send it. I have nothing else to say about this, guys. This is just really, really strong together. There's nothing else to say. You get Icy Wind if you want it. You could, in theory, go Tornadus instead of Ninetales and run Snowscape. But I want it to feature Ninetales. I think it's better to get immediate weather control as well. Feels really, really strong. You get to go Icy Wind for some support. You get to go Encore. You get to go Aurora Veil. Just get screens up as well. Feels really, really good for Kyurem. I would be running this. Okay, so Mewtwo is one of those interesting ones where it's probably just suboptimal to run. Okay, but if you are going to run it, right, you are going to want to pair it with things that beat Calyrex. And you're going to want to pair it with things that beat Calyrex Shadow, both Calyrex Shadow and Calyrex Ice. So why not run Urshifu Dark? That, in my opinion, is what you're going to see. This is going to be the best Pokemon for Mewtwo to have beside it, right? And in my opinion, you're going to want to put Choice Scarf on this thing, right? And basically force those Calyrex Shadows to Terra immediately, or they have to preserve it for the end game, or you can bait a Terra out elsewhere, right? Mewtwo is cool. It doesn't really do too much. Unnerve does stop berries, so you kind of do get a little something going for you, but it's not like it's the craziest thing in the world, right? I don't think it's a very good Pokemon all that, like, can't really say too many things. Like, 130 used to be fast. 130 is not even fast anymore, but if you're going to run this thing, pair it with something that can deal with that Calyrex, and you know what? I think it's Urshifu. Cosmog, cosmoem, once again, guys, gonna speed this one up. Box 32, there's nothing to talk about here. Do not take them out of the box. They are bad. I'm sorry. Solgaleo. Now, Solgaleo, guys, I'm gonna be honest, is a little bit, in my opinion, better than Duskmane just because of the full metal body, which ends up being a clear body, basically, meaning your stats cannot get lowered. And what you want to do is you want to abuse this. Back in the day, you would go big time Dynamax, you would go Bulldoze, you would proc a policy. I don't like procking policy in these formats. It just doesn't feel right to me. But what I still want to do is I still think having a Spectrier is still really, really good. Right? Just something that's fast, something that has support for Solgaleo. Now, it doesn't have to be a Spectrier. I'm a little bit stuck in the past with this one. I'm going to be honest. I didn't really want to look into Solgaleo all that much, guys. I don't like this. I am a big Solgaleo hater. If you guys have been around the channel for a while, I even have a saying that I say, friends don't let friends use Solgaleo. If you want to run it, guys, there's probably better options than Spectre, but fast support is really, really cool, right? You can go ahead and Bulldoze. It gives you speed control, right? Now, you don't have to do this with Bulldoze. You can do this with like an icy wind, a fast icy wind user, right? But Bulldoze is really, really cool. The typing here is very, very nice as well. It just feels good all around. You are a little weak to dark types. You are very weak to Calyrex Shadow. It doesn't feel amazing to me. You'd probably want to throw an Urshifu on this core, like an Urshifu Dark. But like, none of this actually feels good to me. You know, nothing Solgaleo brings to the table in this format actually feels good right now. The psychic typing just feels like a little bit of a liability. Yes, I can Terra out of it. It just still doesn't feel good enough. So I'm going to kind of admit that this one was kind of like a cop-out answer. But you know what? Don't use Solgaleo, guys. We're going to go Duskmane Necrozma now. I kind of don't know why I filtered it this way. But I think Duskmane Necrozma is very, very cool. And Duskmane Necrozma, it appreciates having Amoonguss, okay? It truly appreciates having Amoonguss. You get the Prism Armor ability, which is basically filter, meaning super effective hits actually do 25% or 3/4 of the damage to you. And I think you get a cool new tool in Clear Amulet. And I think that's the one selling point for Necrozma here. And you also want to just heal yourself up. Once again, a Pokemon that takes a while to get chipped down, you want to be healing it up. And you want to have something that can heal it up. Amoonguss is that, right? Not getting intimidated, healing yourself back up. Because that was Necrozma's problem before, right? You would just get Intimidate cycled and there was nothing you could do. But not being able to get Intimidate cycled now, you get a bunch of cool things. You actually are a Steel type, which is really, really good. I believe it's Sunsteel Strike is your move that you get. 100 Steel move. Feels pretty good, right? Once again, you're probably going to want to Terra. Psychic is not doing anything for you in this format, guys. I'll be honest. Psychic typing doesn't really do much. It's kind of a liability, especially where the Calyrex Shadow is everywhere, right? But, I mean, Amoonguss is by far its best partner. Like I said, just healing up your bulky piece that takes a while to chip down. If you do decide to go for a Trick Room route with the Necrozma, you get to go take advantage of that. With Amoonguss, you can redirect and get Trick Room up. You can start sporing under Trick Room. It feels really, really strong. I think this is the core you're going to want to run if you're running Necrozma. Lunala, which is personally one of my favorite restricteds in the format right now. And what I want to talk about right now is I want to talk about King Gambit. I think is a really, really strong partner for it. And I also want to talk about Urshifu Dark. I think you pick one of these two dark types to pair with the Lunala. It feels really, really good. I like King Gambit because, in my opinion, it scares away the Incineroars a little bit better. Not that you really need to, because you're probably running Power Herb, Meteor Beam over here anyways, right? To Q away and get rid of Incineroar. Right? You're probably doing that anyways to get rid of Incineroar. But I do really think King Gambit, also being that Steel type that this kind of core really, really appreciates having, is really, really strong. I think this is the one team I'm going to suggest King Gambit on. I like Assault Vest. I think maybe set up while you try to set Trick Room up with Lunala and pairing this with maybe like an Amoonguss or a Follow Me user also feels really, really good. But overall, I do think some sort of dark type, either whether it be King Gambit, Urshi Dark, is going to be a really, really strong partner for Lunala. This thing is bulky, it can hit hard, but it does not appreciate having those the ghost type attacks or the dark type attacks getting launched into it. Yes, you can Terra out of it, but having King Gambit, which can just kind of sit in front of those attacks, hit the ghost types back, feels incredible. And this core alone feels really, really good. I actually got top 4 at a tournament with this core as well. I'll leave that link somewhere for you guys, maybe at the end of the video, so you guys can check that out if you are curious about how I closed out the core. But either way, really, really good team. Really, really good core. King Gambit, this is probably the one core I would recommend using King Gambit on. Necrozma Dawnwings. Guys, there's nothing much to say here. There's a few different things. Once again, very similar to the Necrozma Duskmane. I feel like with that Prism Armor, you want to take advantage of it. You can throw in Amoonguss here, right? You get the ability to set Trick Room. You get the ability to do things. Once again, you get Wide Guard on Necrozma. You get to heal yourself up after they slowly chip you down. You get to Terra out of not such a great typing, right? And it feels really good. But once again, same concept can still work. You can still run a King Gambit on this team. You still probably want that Dark type paired with this Necrozma, right? But I wanted to mix it up for the sake of being different. I wanted to throw in Amoonguss here. I think it is really, really strong. Kind of, once again, keeping it alive. And just keeping your big restricted alive is kind of the name of the game here. And I know I've said Amoonguss a lot, but keeping your restricted alive, especially restricted that take a while to chip down because of good abilities like this, or because of busted typings, keeping them alive just works so much better than just trying to go committing to offense with them. You can commit to offense with them while you heal it up with Amoonguss, but you might as well have that Amoonguss option to heal it up. It's just so good to not have. It's too good to pass up on, in my opinion. Reshiram. Reshiram, guys, is going to be, in my opinion, it really appreciates Rillaboom. It really appreciates having Rillaboom. It really appreciates having that grass type that can pressure those ground types in the format. It really appreciates the fake out support. It appreciates just the potential U-turn pivot ability. It appreciates having taunt, so you don't have to worry about trick rooms, so nothing can set up on you. But Reshiram alone is a really strong option. I think Rillaboom is a very good pairing with it. I think you can get away with something like an Ogre Pond Water. A little more of an underrated option here as well. I think Suicune could definitely be seeing usage here as well. I think it's fun. You get the likes of Icy Wind. You get Tailwind, which is really good speed control. You get to go Helping Hand if you really think you need it. I don't think you do, right? But more importantly, you get the speed control. You get to go Snarls into the Calyrexes. It feels like these three could just be a core themselves. I think Rillaboom and or Suicune. Suicune's more of a bit of a wild card pick for the Reshiram, but these ones in general are really strong. Both of these options just support Reshiram so well, right? Whereas if you have the speed control under Suicune, you no longer need to run the Tailwind onto Reshiram, right? And you can just take advantage of running maybe like a Blue Flare for massive... Whoop, that is not in the move slot, right? You can run Blue Flare for massive damage when you need it, along with a Heat Wave. Reshiram does have an issue with hitting its moves, which is a tad bit concerning. But other than that, I mean, I think these... That's a Reshiram problem, not a partner for Reshiram problem. And Rillaboom really strong beside Reshiram and feels really good in my very brief testing with Rillaboom Reshiram. That's probably my winner here, but Suicune's more of an off meta. Yeah, throw a Suicune on there, why not kind of thing. Zekrom. Now, normally I would say, you know, do something with Zekrom. Zekrom kind of has one of those typings that does well in restricted formats. But we have Miraidon now. So unless your Zekrom is going to do something that Miraidon doesn't, just don't run Zekrom, okay? I will once again say that you want to abuse, if you're going to use it, abuse the 150. Go Shenpao beside this thing. That way you can hit the ground types, right? You hit your ground types, you boost your physical attack. It just makes a lot of sense. These two go together pretty well. If you're going to use Zekrom, do this. Just don't use Zekrom. Save yourself the struggle, guys. You're going to have to work 20 times harder using Zekrom. Now, once again, if you're just out there trying to have fun with Zekrom, this is where I would start. But if you're trying to actually win, don't use Zekrom. I don't think it's a very good Pokemon. I think it's just entirely outclassed by the likes of something like Miraidon. Eternatus. And Eternatus, guys, is one of those Pokemon that doesn't really get to see a lot of usage. It kind of falls and stumbles down a little bit because it's always just kind of gets overlooked. But I think with the ability to Terra right now, it's actually going to be pretty strong. I don't think it's going to be amazing, but I think it's definitely going to be pretty strong. And Poison Dragon is pretty good offensive coverage. You probably don't want a Dragon move. I don't need a Dragon move. You're probably going to go Sludge Bomb because Sludge Bomb is a really strong option. There's a lot of grass types. You guys have just seen the last 40 minutes of this video, and I've just suggested how many grass types now? I haven't been counting, but probably a good chunk. And Eternatus does a very good job into that. It also does very good versus the Kyogres that may be eventually coming into the metagame. Poison Dragon is a pretty decent typing. Long story short, right? You hit things back, you hit the fairy types that would normally hit your dragon, right? And my suggestion here is you want to lean into keeping this thing alive. That is, in my opinion, what you are looking at for Eternatus. And something I would talk about here, once again, just the Rillabooms, the Amoongusses, right? I've said it before, guys, and I'll say it again. Keeping your broken restricteds alive is absolutely disgusting, right? But I am going to go a little off topic here, and I'm going to say Wochen, right? Once again, this actually kind of keeps it alive. You get to go Pollen Puff into Eternatus, which still feels really good. You do not hinder. This is one of the few restricteds that actually like one of the few bulky restricteds that likes hitting on the special side, meaning you don't need to necessarily pair this one with Tinglu. You can pair this one with Wo-Chen, and you can pair this with Wo-Chen, hinder off those physical attacks that may be going into you, right? Bulk yourself up a little more. You still get Pollen Puff. You can heal up your Eternatus. It feels really, really good, and just keeping pieces on the field beside Eternatus feels incredible. Right, just keeping your Eternatus on the field, having the longevity, that's what you're here for with Eternatus. There's tons of other options to go with here, but I think these grass types feel really, really good because once again, they beat that ground type that would normally take you down. And I just think having something along those lines here is very, very strong. Almost to the end here, guys. We're going to go Zacian. Zacian crowned, it's going to like Gouging Fire. I think Gouging Fire is going to be very, very fun beside it. I think Shenpao is going to be very, very fun beside it. I have not fully tested any of these cores yet. I think Ogerpon Water, also very, very strong, right? Now, granted, you could probably just make all 4 of these a team, right? I'm just going to give a quick description of each of them. Gouging Fire, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. You get to go Breaking Swipe to keep yourself alive, and you get to go Howl to boost your attack stat. That just sounds good. Doesn't seem bad to me. The big issue here, though, is the Precipice Blades is going to be a problem. Right, but once again, you can tear it out of it. You can't Breaking Swipe the Groudon, which is the main issue there. But you can tear it out of it, but you can only tear one of them. So I don't know if I'm sold on the core, but clicking Howl beside Zacian sounds pretty fun to me, if you ask me. Shenpao, once again, just similar concept to the Gouging Fire, although this time this one is taking more of an advantage of I'm going to hit away the ground types. I'm actually going to be able to hit them super effectively. And I'm also going to boost my Zacian damage, but with Sword of Ruin as opposed to using Howl, right? So still feels pretty good. And then Ogerpon is just that defensive, offensive piece here that feels really, really strong next to Zacian. It just feels like a match made in heaven for it, right? Just Zacian, balancy kind of composition. It feels pretty good, right? That's what I would say here. You can also go ahead and say Urshifu Water. Whoops, that is Umbreon. Somehow that came up. Urshifu Water, also another really, really strong option. I don't hate it. I think it's pretty decent. You can go ahead and chuck it on the team here. Probably going to want to go Scarf on a team like this because why not? It just feels good, right? This is what you're going to want to put beside the Zacian. Any of these options, if not multiple of these options, are really, really strong here. Just getting rid of the ground types that Zacian doesn't like, getting rid of the fire types that Zacian doesn't like, especially for this Urshifu, works really, really well. Zacian Hero Form, guys, I don't think this one is going to be used all that much. I think if you compare this thing with like a Defiant user though, and you can really take advantage. Once again, similar to the Gouging Fire plays, similar to the Shenpao, you can use both of those there. But once again, I think I am going to recommend Defiant beside this one. I think some sort of Defiant feels really, really good. Whether that is base Ogerpon, whether that is once again a King Gambit. Maybe King Gambit does come back here. Since you have the Fairy typing to deal with the fighting types, perhaps something like this works. One of these two. Feels pretty good, but I think I would lean towards Ogerpon because you get the redirection, you get to do things, but I don't think base Zacian is very good. I do think maybe having a Clear Amulet is a cool way to run it, but Ogerpon and King Gambit, having that Defiant user feels good in general besides Zacian, either form, but I just chose to talk about it beside the Hero form because I really didn't have much else to talk about beside the Hero form. Guys, Zamazenta I'm going to group together, and this is last but not least, guys. I can't believe this video is almost an hour long. That's going to be insane, but most importantly, Zamazenta, some will say I saved the best for last, but this is going to be very similar overlap. And Zamazenta's big benefit is fast body press, right? That is what Zamazenta does. Zamazenta is here for fast body press. It is going to do exactly that. That is what it's here for, right? So what my opinion, lean into it. Similar to the other things, you want to lean into it. I really love having a Rillaboom here. I really love having an Amoonguss here. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but on a lot of these Pokemon, this feels optimal, right? Zamazenta does not like ground types. Okay, Rillaboom hits the ground types. Rillaboom gets grassy terrain to heal up the Zamazenta. Amoonguss gets redirection to protect your Zamazenta while you can potentially click Iron Defense. It just all makes sense, right? And I know I haven't shown like a bunch of crazy Pokemon, but I don't think there are a bunch of crazy Pokemon to pair with these things. There's consistency here, right? Consistency is what I'm looking at when I approach these terms, right? How do I keep my restricted Pokemon alive? How do I capitalize on it? I took a very more balancey, more defensive-based approach on a lot of these restricteds as we do wrap this video up. But I think it's the right way to approach it because you have the ability to keep these broken Pokemon on the field longer than they should necessarily be on the field for, and I don't see why you wouldn't want to do that. Yes, you can go aggressive, but with a Zamazenta specifically, you're gonna run. Your whole goal is to be slow, get a body press up, get some iron defenses, get some body press off, right? Why not keep yourself on the field for longer? That's the way I look at it. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. We have come to the end. If you guys did actually manage to make it through the whole video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate that. If you guys do enjoy this type of content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Once again, guys, I did leave the chapters in the video so you can guys kind of chip through to whatever restricted you were looking for, because otherwise watching this an hour straight is going to be insane. But thank you all so much for watching. Please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help the channel, and I do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to stop rambling now. I'm going to get on out of here, and I'll catch you all in a future video.